Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining another Enable Bootcamp. Today, cybersecurity for medium risk clients. This is a continuation of the cybersecurity for low risk clients. As always, to get the legalese out of the way, if we make any forward-looking statements during today's session, take it with a grain of salt. Final form, function, delivery dates may change. This is going to be a starting point. This is a primer. This is not a complete distillation of everything you should be doing for your clients around cybersecurity. This is going to be starting points, things that should be included as a minimum. And everything that we're going to be covering here, again, these are great baselines. They are great starting points, and they should be part of your policies and processes that you have in place. But good cybersecurity is an ongoing adventure, and it requires proper risk management, which is going to be a never-ending, ever-evolving task that sometimes the value of it is not fully appreciated, and that becomes a challenge for MSPs. And what we're going to be covering today, this can apply to you and your clients. So all of these security controls and best practices, again, I'll try and reference them in ways whenever I'm talking about something that is pertinent to your relationship as an MSP to your client. But most of this is all going to apply to you and your clients. We're going to be making references to a lot of frameworks today and different standards. And while, take notes, take screenshots, use the knowledge that we're going to be able to convey today. But if you're going to make a conscious decision that you're going to pursue implementing one of these frameworks or collection of security controls, go to the source, go find the original source documentation. Most of the time, whoever is responsible for that also provides a ton of additional addendums and templates and worksheets and assessments, questionnaires. So go out and take advantage of all of that. It's all free. There will be a bunch of paid for options as well out there that recontextualize it, repackage it, massage it a little bit, but the core knowledge is there freely available. Go take advantage of it. And for these frameworks we are going to be referencing today, just in case this is the first time you have ever heard of some of these frameworks or standards. First, there's the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. That's done by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. That is US focused, but there is no reason why you can't use it elsewhere in other regions. The CIS controls, that's the Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls. That is a wonderful set of baseline security controls that really should be a baseline of anybody's environments. There's the CMMC, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. That's going to be pertinent for anybody that is US based, that is either themselves or have clients that bid on federal contracts, because in a few months time, unless things change, October 1st, all contracts going forward are going to require a CMMC level of accountability to either the self-assessment or the third-party assessment, depending on the requirements of the contract. I don't want to say dirty secret, but something you realize once you really start digging into the CMMC is that what the CMMC is calling for is for you to implement NIST 800-171 and NIST 800-172 procedures, is all CMMC is asking for. Essential 8, this is the Australian Cybersecurity Center Essential 8 maturity model. So anybody that's here with us from Australia, that's going to be your reference point. The PCI DSS, which is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. Anybody that's in probably North America and elsewhere that has a credit card processing terminal or service, You are familiar with this PCI DSS audits that you get yearly. Your clients are probably also getting those. Those are going to be a familiar one for many of us here. CJIS security policy. So CJIS is the Criminal Justice Information Services security policy. So this is going to be the guidelines and frameworks that municipal and municipal police departments, sheriff departments, what they have to follow. Cyber Essentials is from the United Kingdom. That's their national cybersecurity center's Cyber Essentials. And then Cyber Essentials Plus, which is their accreditation or assessment of it. There's the HIPAA security rules, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Security Rule. And we'll be talking about it in a reference today. The security rule, not the privacy rule. And then ISO 27001, that is the big enterprise level accreditation for proper security controls. That's the International Organization of Standardization and the International Electrotechnical Commission 27001 series of information security management systems. And while we are going to be talking about what you should be doing as common security controls in a medium risk environment today, there is the question of, well, how do you determine the risk profile of a client? And it depends, as the first answer is, well, it depends on the client's environment, size of the business, the revenue loss potential from an event, regulatory compliance. If you choose to follow a specific framework because of regulatory compliance, chances are there is a defined method of risk evaluation associated with that framework. But we're not going to have time today to really get into that process, because that would be 2 hours, 3 hours alone just on figuring out how to evaluate a client. So if that is something you're wanting some information on, if you are looking for some information to that point of being able to evaluate the risk profile of your clients, check out the boot camps that Stephanie Hammond has. One of her boot camps is performing assessments that yield results. And part of that boot camp touches on creating a risk profile of your clients. But remember, it's going to be highly dependent upon the industry, the vertical regulatory compliance that's going to dictate where somebody falls. And point of personal opinion here, and also because Alan asked the question in the chat, just by your participation in the relationship as an MSP with your client, you are automatically elevating your client to medium risk in some ways, because your relationship with them, the fact you have access into their systems, you have the keys to the kingdom, and you as an MSP are a very attractive target for threat actors. If you have a client that would have normally been low risk, by introducing yourself into the relationship, you're probably raising their risk profile to a medium risk organization. And your MSPs yourself, well, what is your risk profile as an MSP? It's going to be medium or high. And depending on your client base, what kind of verticals they operate in, what kind of regulatory compliance you and your clients have to worry about. Are you signing BAAs for your medical clients? Are you taking on the role of virtual CTO, CISO? All of those things are going to impact whether you yourself are medium, or high risk. But if you're an MSP, you should not consider yourself a low risk when it comes to security. You are medium or high risk profile, because again, you are an attractive target for threat actors. So as we go through the different security controls that we're going to be going through today, we have them grouped together in their prevalence. So how often are these controls being asked for by different frameworks and standards? But also we're ordering them kind of the way that that most of the frameworks reference them. Most of the frameworks reference them in a order of in a descending order of importance. They list their baselines and their core principles first, the most important things, usually the things that give you the most benefit for the least impact or are, mission critical building blocks. They define those first, and that's kind of what we're going to be sticking with today for how we go through those. And we're starting out with hardware inventory and control, so asset management. So if you were here for the low risk boot camp, there's going to be a little bit of recapping, but I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time going back over all the low risk stuff, simply because we're not going to have time to go over the low risk and the medium risk stuff. So I'm going to leave up the low risk slides as they come across. Take a screenshot of them if you need them. But I'm just not going to be able to spend a lot of time on them because, again, we'll simply run out of time. But for hardware inventory, why is this important? Why should you maintain a good up-to-date hardware inventory? It is foundational to a lot of other things you're going to be doing. You can't defend what you don't know about. If you don't know something exists, you can't defend it properly. Also, keeping track of assets, such as who has it and where it is, can be very useful. That can also be a part of and assist with lifecycle management. Knowing what devices are out there, what their age is, when they were manufactured, when their warranty ends, when their planned end of life date should be. As an MSP, that should be something that you're keeping and maintaining for your clients. Also, it can help you maintain operational efficiency if you're running hardware as a service, or you're running a lease program for your clients to purchase equipment, and you've standardized on a specific vendor or stack. Knowing what you have in production, what your predicted or projected consumption is going to be down the road, can help you out there. And also, it's going to be required to streamline vulnerability remediation and mitigations. If you don't know which clients have a specific type of appliance or specific manufacturer of a VoIP system, well, whenever you hear about, oh, you know what, I know that we have some clients that are using Yay links, and all of a sudden now I hear about a vulnerability involving Yay links. Well, not only do I need to learn about that vulnerability, I have to learn which devices it affects, and then I have to go out and figure out if those are the devices my clients have or not. And if I don't already have that recorded and written down somewhere, that's now a project that I have to execute across all of my clients in the middle of a panic moment because it's a critical severity. So having good up-to-date hardware inventory is going to be really, really, really useful, especially for you as an MSP. Here are the low risk controls that are asked for. And again, I tried to group these together to show what are the common asks from these different frameworks. So all of these different frameworks have multiple different controls that are referencing hardware and asset inventory. And whenever we move up to medium risk, you see that there's only a few that ask for more additional controls in a medium risk environment. So you're still going to have all your low risk controls they want, but then there's more additional controls they want you to put in place once it's a medium risk environment. And here is the low risk. These are the ones we went over in the previous session, but really quickly, that's all about, creating and maintaining a list of assets. And you're going to see create and maintain a lot in today's session, because a lot of what we're going to be discussing today is not point solutions, a product that you go buy and install. It's processes and documentation and how you operate and your workflows is going to be more about today's conversations. You're going to need process documentation on how you discover devices, how you authorize devices, somewhere to record all that information, and a way to discover and document unauthorized assets. When we move up to the medium risk profiles, they start asking for some additional controls. One is, it's not only that they want you to go and discover and do that once a year and update your list, they're now switching over to, you need active discovery of assets connected to the network. And that's going to be a scanner, an agent, an appliance, whatever, that's on the network that's able to give you the ability to alert and audit on new connected devices on a daily basis or more frequently, preferably as soon as a new device that is not authorized to be on the environment shows up, you get the warning, the alert, it starts your response. Monitor for unauthorized connections of devices to networks or other resources. So that's taking it a little bit further out to saying it's not just about your local network at the office, it's also your cloud resources, your M365 tenant. Going in and making sure that no unauthorized devices are connected to or subscribed to any of the services from there. And M365 is a really good example of this, because if you do not go through the additional steps of setting up some controls, then a user that has an M365 account and email set up for their work can go log into that account from their own personal computer and access that M365 tenant and their applications and the data that's there. Also, access control list, MAC filtering, or other similar type of control to make sure that you've got some ability to basically just prevent anybody from coming in, finding a port, plugging in the device, and automatically, getting a THCP lease and being functional on the network. And where can we help on the enable side? So we have Insight and Incentral that has the topology mapping and the general awareness of it can show you what devices are on the network, what's connected, but it doesn't have that rogue device alerting, and it doesn't have a methodology in there to kind of record authorization for devices or not. But with EDR, with the Ranger feature inside of EDR, that gives you the ability to have an agent in the environment. It's doing a scan of all other devices in the environment. It's doing fingerprinting, and it's returning those as alerts. So it's saying, I found a new device. Here's the MAC address, manufacturer, host name, the OS on it. Give you some additional info. It gives you a place to record whether, discovered on this date and time, reviewed, authorized, not authorized. And even the ability to isolate that device automatically on the network with a single click by saying, all right, all of my other devices in the environment that have EDR installed on it do not communicate with this rogue device until we have it brought under management, or you bring it, you take it off the network that doesn't belong. And there are plenty of other, options out there, standalone tools, individual, either paid for tools, or even if you want to kind of get into it, you can even script this type of functionality. But that's a skill barrier, that's a time and resource barrier. So there are plenty of options out there without you having to reinvent the wheel. All right, then on asset management for software inventories. So knowing what software you have out in production in your environments is going to be very, very important, because you need to know about your vendor security bulletins and alerts from them. And if you don't know what applications, line of business software is in place at each of your clients in a way that you can go quickly and easily reference, that's a challenge in of itself. But if you don't go through that process, you're not going to know which vendors to go subscribe to their status pages or their alerts or their security updates from them. Because if think of it practically, if you don't know a client has a particular line of business software in place, you don't know to go to that vendor and register for their email alerts. And whenever they announce a major vulnerability on a Friday afternoon, you're not going to get that immediate alert from them. You're now dependent on just happening to by happenstance catching that vulnerability because it gets published in a news article or it comes through a threat feed somewhere else. So having that capability is going to be really important to situational awareness and knowing, because that's one of the most common questions I get asked is, how do you keep up with everything? And the answer is, you do not keep up with everything. You have to be very thoughtful and prescriptive about it. You have to say, these are my clients, these are the tools that they use. I need to only worry about those tools or those applications and software they're using. And also having good software inventory lets you, monitor for license and consumption, so you're not over consuming or under consuming or overpaying, or your clients underpaying to you. It can help out with compliance to license usage. That's more of a concern in enterprise than it is small and medium business, but it's still a good benefit. It can also help with patch times and mitigations if you know which systems have what on them. Also, life cycle planning, end of life, end of support. It doesn't have to be a discovery project after the fact, and then you're trying to convince a client 3 months after something is into support that they really should replace it. That should be a conversation that's happening a year ahead, 6 months ahead of an end of support date. And also, helping out with a bunch of other things like shadow IT. For software inventory, low risk, these are, every one of the different controls and frameworks we're referencing today, almost all of them have something to say about software inventory, except for the HIPAA security rule. It doesn't say anything explicit, but if you're going to do the other things that the HIPAA security rule asks you to do, it's going to be really hard to do it without a software inventory. And then when we move up to the medium risk profile, there are even more controls that are being asked for. And here's the low risks. Again, just a few seconds up, so anybody that wants to capture this in a screenshot, you can. These are all of those common low risk best practices that should be in place. Maintaining a list of software, how it's deployed, the planned decommission date for it, only authorizing currently supported software. If there's unsupported software, it needs to be documented. The risk mitigations and exceptions need to be in place for it. Somebody needs to own that risk, and it shouldn't be the MSP. It needs to be the client owning that risk by saying, yes, I understand this is bad and you want to fix it, but I'm going to override you and tell you not to fix it. That is a perfectly fine decision for a business to make, but at that point, it is their decision and their risk to assume. But when we move over into the medium risk profile, the additional add-ons that controls are going to be asking for is they want an active discovery of and documentation of software in the environment, similar to the way the hardware inventory, when you move up the medium risk profiles, they want you to transition to active discovery, a method by which you can continuously update that inventory. Also, they start asking for the implementation of technical controls for whitelisting of authorized software. they'll also start asking about technical controls to prevent applications from running as system or root. And usually this, there are some technical controls that can help with this, but most of the time, this is a processes and standard operating procedure question. Whenever you're installing an application that does not need to have full system access, it only needs particular sets of rights. Do not, install it as a admin. Do not install it as a system user account. Or give it that capability to run as system or as root whenever you're setting up, configuring how your environments are done. And enable can help here with Insight and N-central on the monitoring side of this with the active discovery of software. We can also help you out with the technical controls there, preventing applications from running as root. You can have set up service monitors to check specific applications you may be worried about to make sure that they aren't running in the context of an elevated user or in the context of a specific account. But another technical control on that is going to be like your auto elevates, or instead of allowing an end user to get through the UAC prompt, there is a back-end process where you're alerted and you provide the admin elevation when needed. Data protection. So identifying and securing data, and this is going to be separate from backup. Backup and recovery is a different set of controls and practices. This is about the data itself. And that's because if you do not know and understand what data is being processed, what your regulatory obligations are around that data, or you don't know what you need to do with the data. So whether it's, retention for legal compliance, how long you have to keep it around, how you have to treat it in transit and at rest, who is allowed to see it. You're going to need to be able to show due care and due diligence when handling personally identifiable information or other sensitive data. It's important during e-discovery, and also it's a really important part of understanding your client's business operations. If you don't understand the type of data that your clients generate and process on a daily basis, you are missing opportunities to make them more efficient, to consult them in improving their business operations, but also you're operating a little bit blind. You may be missing something that is mission critical to your client that's going to bite you one day because you never fully understood the full data flow through your client's business. So for low risk environments, everybody is asking for something to be done in your low risk environment. So I consider this as a baseline. Everybody should be doing it, no questions asked, regardless of what type of business it is. But whenever we get up to the medium risk profile, there's even more here. And especially in certain ones of these frameworks, you'll see that the CMMC asks for a lot more controls to be implemented. The HIPAA security rule asks for more. The PCI DSS and the CGIS, they all ask for a lot more on top of the basics. And those basic common controls for low risk, create and maintain, we see that again, because again, this is a lot about building processes and the documentation and the workflows to support those processes. Create and maintain data management processes and documentation, so you know how is data supposed to be handled and processed. Creating a data inventory, recording who owns it, who processes it, how data should be retained and disposed. Access control so that only people that need the data have access to the data. Encrypting end user devices is a common protection asked for here. And N-central, again, N-central Insights, Passportal, MSP Manager, risk intelligence. These all have a role to play somewhere in helping to deliver on these controls. And then when we move up to the medium risk, we still have that create and maintain, but it's now data classification that is relevant to the vertical or the industry that they are in. So the easy example here is, if you have a client that needs to adhere to CMMC because they're a federal contractor, well, they have to, and in order to get the contract, they're going to have to demonstrate a certain level of maturity in their cybersecurity practices. And one of those things is, have you properly classified your data? So again, in the instance of CMMC, you've got to be able to say, yes, we have classified we have classified and assigned those classifications to our data for public versus controlled versus restricted versus controlled unclassified information, or even federal contract information, FCI, I believe it is. Those are all different classifications of data you may have to work with, and you shouldn't be commingling that data, not in where you store it, how you access it. The same permissions shouldn't be usable to control to access your controlled unclassified information as the permissions needed to access any public marked classified information data. You're going to need to create and maintain documentation on data flow, and you're not going to be able to do data flow until you know what data is there and what the classification of the data is there, so you can determine how it is processed and where it goes. Data must be encrypted at rest and in transit, and segmenting data based on processing and sensitivity of data. So again, if you have controlled unclassified information in an environment, it needs to be in a different file share. It's the simple example. It needs to be in a different file share with a different security group or a different set of permissions, so that you're not so somebody that does not need access to that isn't able to use their permissions that they use to access that financial information or that sales information that's in another share location. Then another collection of security controls that are often, again, these are considered to be you should be doing this first before you do anything else down the line we're going to be covering, and secure configurations of hardware and software. And why is this important? Misconfigured systems are right there behind vulnerabilities in being responsible for successful threat attacks. If you have a misconfigured system, and a very good example of this is somebody has an AWS S3 bucket that's publicly exposed with personally identifiable information or sensitive business information in there. That is a misconfiguration, and that is exposing PII data, which represents possibly a data breach, which would then start the dominoes falling for, all right, we got to notify these people. We have to contact the Secretary of State if it's required in our state. We'll have to contact HHS if it's a medical client, and it snowballs from there off of that one misconfiguration. And that's a single misconfiguration by one individual person that has the capability of exposing a lot of liabilities. So that's why secure configuration is considered so important. Also, having secure configuration and processes around it means you're not going to be suffering from configuration drift, because systems are updated, systems are moved, systems are reloaded, but as they are, drift can be introduced. Not everything is on the same baseline anymore, and that brings unknowns, and unknowns are dangerous. Also, other benefits, it's all about getting the basic configurations in place, because sometimes they are the most effective security protections that you can put in place for a client. For low risk, everybody's asking for this in some way, shape, or form in low risk environments. When we move up to medium risk, still there are additional controls being asked for by about everyone here. And here's the common low risk controls: creating and maintaining a process for secure, again, that create and maintain, documentation and processes need to be backing up all of this stuff. Idle timeouts, disabling default accounts, these types of, basic best practices again. And whenever we move up to medium risk, now we're getting into disabling, and this is a security control that's been around for a while, especially if you're a Linux user. This is a principle you kind of just learn by default. Disabling or removing any unnecessary Windows services or daemons. If you don't need a service or a daemon on an appliance, on a computer, to perform a specific function, if it's not needed, it does not need to be there. So remove it if you can. Implement and monitoring secure DNS configuration of network assets. So making sure that your DNS resolvers and your DNS server itself, wherever or whatever it is properly configured. Force device lockout after successive failed attempts. Now this is going to be, and we'll see this mentioned later about access control. This is about having kind of a hard lock on a device. It's not unusual to hear, yep, I failed logging in a couple of times and it locked me out of my account. So I can't log into my account for 30 minutes. That's pretty common to hear. But this control is specifically asking for the device to be locked down. So if you fail to log in to a laptop for X number of times, or into a mobile device for X number of times, that device locks down completely, and you either you can't retry to log in with any account for X number of minutes, or it has to be manually reprovisioned or reset. And another common security control that's being asked for a lot more now than it used to be is that ability to remotely wipe an asset if it is lost or stolen. But this is something that you don't want to try to figure this out after you've already lost control of a device. You want this to be something that is configured and in place beforehand. So whenever you lose control of a device, all you have to do is, as an example, inside of Intune or inside of Insight or Incentral, set up so the next time that device gets online and it checks in with whatever that platform is, it's going to lock itself down or wipe the data off of it. And Insight and Incentral, we can help you out with that there through automations. And also the DNS filtering, it has a role to play there with secure DNS configuration. Right, next set of controls, user and privileged account management. So this is, of course, why is account management important? Well, it helps prevent privilege creep. You don't want a user over time gaining access to more and more permissions, more and more data, without dialing back what they have access to that they no longer need. And the simple example is, you have somebody that changes roles. They're changing from sales to finance. Well, they're going to need access to a whole different set of data in that new role, but they don't need to continue to have access to the data from their old role. Also, having account management that's properly controlled and accounted for, it reduces the opportunity of non-admin users to compromise the secure configuration of assets. Proper account management also helps out with authorization and authentication to access data and assets. So again, back to the example of having an M365 account set up. a user with an M365 account. Yes, that's provisioned out through their Azure AD and it's on their company laptop, but they can still use their valid login credentials for 365 to go log in from their personal computer. You're going to want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Reducing threat actors' potential foothold locations. You know, the more restrictive, the more mindful you are about accounts, the less likely you're going to have an account that drifts around, has the wrong permissions on it, is treated poorly, and the credentials for it leak, or that account is taken advantage of by a vulnerability, and now you have an attacker sitting there with full administrator rights or enterprise admin rights for a domain just because they happen to compromise a user account for the bookkeeper that only comes in and checks things once a month. And also having proper account management, easier for lockdown, password rotations, auditing, things of that nature, having it centralized through something. Low risk, everybody's asking for things here around low risk. And then whenever we get up to medium risk, there are only a few more additional asks here. It's not as stringent because honestly, it's making the proposition is that a lot of these things are baselines. Doesn't matter the risk profile of the client, they are things you should be doing. Such as maintaining a list of all accounts. You need to know what accounts exist and where they exist and what those accounts have access to. But you're of course you are going to want to have a primary focus on privileged accounts, administrator accounts, or accounts with special privileges that can do things that other accounts can't. We're going to want to also, force the use of unique, sufficiently complex passwords, MFA when available, disabling accounts after they've been idle for 45 days, bunch of standard things. But whenever we move up to that medium risk, the things that we're adding in there is we're also asking that you maintain an inventory of service accounts. Who owns it, the functional purpose of that, and the last review date. Because the security control and the ask here is that those service accounts are very important. They're very privileged. They are very important to the business function of a business. You need to be reviewing them on a basis, and you need to know when the last time they were looked at so that they can be looked at within whatever that time frame is, whether you set that up to be yearly or every 6 months. Also, at the medium risk profile, they start asking that centralized account creation and management be at play. So that's going to be LDAP, AD or Azure AD, AWS, identity and access management, or any other identity and access management platform. The main common thread through all of them is that they want you to have a centralized, authenticated, authorized, and auditable account management process in place. Whatever it is, they want you to have. And we'll be able to help here with Insight and Incentral on the service accounts, monitoring those, maybe even kicking them off on a scheduled action or restart, and also to help out with the if you're using Intune integration to help out there. But also our Passportal solution can help out here with being that source of truth for the documentation and when things were done. Access control management. So this is going to be about access control, making sure that only the authorized people or services have access to what they need to have access to. Whether that's just data or business processes, proper access control. It can help with malicious or intentional loss or of control over data. So that's part of your LD loss prevention. Also, having access control helps for non-intentional data leakage as well. And also, it can help with authorization and permission creep. So those are some, those are kind of just the good benefits. There's a ton of other reasons why you should do it because they're functional to other things, but those are like the primary benefits for it that you get as an at scale as an MSP having to do, manage for multiple clients. For low risk, there's not, everybody's asking for things here. Whenever we step up to medium risk, it stops dropping off a little bit. There's not much more they're asking you to do for a low risk versus a medium risk for some of these control sets. And the common low risk ones, I want you to create and maintain, again, that's showing up again, create and maintain process and documentation. So again, the medium risk, they're asking you to create and maintain an inventory of authentication and authorization systems. So not only that you have a list of accounts, but where those account lives, what systems are they using? Authorization for users in those systems that need to be audited annually or more frequently. And you need to maintain a process for making sure that you have a good onboarding and offboarding of users into those systems so that whenever you're either adding or removing them, the proper permissions account is being proper authorization and is being provided for them to whatever they need. Next set of controls is vulnerability management. So with vulnerability management, that is going to give us, well, a lot of benefits for doing, vulnerability management. Primary thing is unpatched vulnerabilities are probably the primary vector for threat actors to leverage. Most successful attacks are going to be, but unpatched vulnerabilities, they are, one of the primary sources of issues because, well, most vulnerabilities that are taken advantage of during a threat event are most of the time weeks, months, or years old whenever an attacker successfully leverages them. So it's really important that you get it under control, that you've got processes for them because it does significantly reduce the risk profile of an environment. The shorter that window is for a threat actor to take advantage of a vulnerability, well, if you're playing the statistics, the less likely they are going to be able to take advantage of it. Dealing with vulnerabilities it's never going to reach a complete state. It has to be defined by processes to keep you in the loop and on top of it. Vulnerability scans help you find obvious deficiencies that can be remediated whenever you're performing your vulnerability management. And it kind of boils down to that really simple statement there at the end. If you're not checking if your windows are locked, how do you know they are? You may have locked them yesterday, but you don't know they're locked unless you're monitoring it and you're checking on it to make sure. And for our low risk, you'll see here that we have quite a few of our different control groups asking for low risk. For the medium risk, you'll see there's even some more asks here around vulnerability management, particularly for the CMMC and the PCI DSS. Here is again, the low risk profile. Make sure you, for these low risk, again, these are the common ones that most of them share. If you go look at a particular framework, there may be a low risk item here I didn't include, but that's just because nobody else was also asking for it as a common item at that level. But creating and maintaining vulnerability management process. So again, you have to create that process and document it. Whatever comes out of that needs to be risk-informed remediation. And your patches and updates and firmware being applied needs to be in a good cadence based on the whatever your regulatory demands are. Usually 15 days or less for criticals is kind of that line in the sand for most environments. Some go even as low as a 10-day window for vulnerabilities to be addressed. And then in medium risk environments, they start asking that we start performing vulnerability scans quarterly or more frequently, as well as external vulnerability scans for against the environments. And that's not only going to be like the local endpoints and the internal network, but also doing the vulnerability scan from the outside against the public facing side of the network, as well as any cloud resources or web applications. And making sure you have the documentation and processes in place for remediation of discovered vulnerabilities to be applied monthly or more frequently. You're doing a good part of this already via Insight or Essential with the patch management engine. The patch management engine is actually, going above and beyond here on some of this because it's doing it daily or multiple times a week for you, depending on how you have it scheduled up. And the nice thing, one of the nice things about the patch management engine inside of the products is that is not only applying the remediations for discovered vulnerabilities, it's also discovering those vulnerabilities, those missing patches and updates. And personal point of opinion here, if you find that you have trouble convincing your clients that it's important to do patch management or that they should pay you to perform patch management, if they're not paying you to do patch management today, they're probably not going to pay you to do patch management tomorrow. So change the conversation. Start talking about it in the context of vulnerability management and risk mitigation services that you're offering, not just a line item on your services contract that says patching. And that's just a consequence of not seeing the forest for the trees, having your blinders on as a business owner. If you've never done patching and you've never had a major incident up to this point and you've been in business for 20 years, then why the hell would you start patching today if you have to get over that objection? And changing the conversation into vulnerability remediation and mitigation is a great way of doing that. Next, log management. So why is log management important? Why are we concerned about it? Well, you won't know what happened without logs. You can make really good educated guesses, but you're not going to know. Auditors also, they're not going to know what happened if they have to come in after an event and assess it. It gives you that opportunity to honestly actually answer those what happened questions, because if you don't have logs and something happens and the client asks what happened, you're back to educated guesses. Also having logs, it means you're reducing your mean time to resolve most issues because you have quality data to work with. Engineers, technicians absolutely love having logs. As a business, you may not like finding somewhere and the cost associated with storing those logs, but for the roles, for the responsibilities of a technician or engineer, logs are invaluable. And also, you might just need it for compliance purposes. For low risk environments, the downside here, well, this has, again, showing us that Essential 8 and Cyber Essentials aren't directly referencing this. They do not anywhere call for what a lot of the other frameworks call for. But if you were going to deliver on some of these, it wouldn't be that. If you're going to do a lot of the other controls that Cyber Essentials and Essential 8 is asking for, you're going to need some level of logging and auditability. Question that came in, recommend logs be stored in the cloud. Depends upon the sensitivity of the data that's going to be contained in those logs. Most of the time, logs are just telemetry information and failed successes of actions. And keeping that in a cloud solution, not a bad option. And it doesn't really take that much bandwidth to move logs across the wire into a cloud service somewhere. Now, is there an inherent benefit between doing it locally and cloud-based? But there are some things like, if you're using cloud-based solution, it probably auto scales for storage, so you don't run out. So you're not having to worry about a local file share or a local storage appliance running out of room to hold logs. But at the same time, because it auto grows for you to contain it, is that a ever increasing cost you have to worry about with a subscription if you're going to maintain logs for an extended amount of time. So you have to go in to make this business, the business impact assessment there of which one works out better for you. In medium risk, when we move up to the medium risk environments, you'll see that again, Essential 8, Cyber Essentials aren't calling for anything additional, but there are a lot more additional controls being called for, like in PCI DSS and in the CMMC or the NIST CSF. And here's those common controls again. So everybody that wants to, grab a snapshot of those, grab those. Common controls for, low risk, again, that create and maintain again. You're going to want to be able to create and maintain a log management process that documents what logs are required, how long they should be kept, where they should be stored. Enable the appropriate logging that needs to be done across all assets, whatever they may be, and having proper storage of those collected logs. So having enough storage to satisfy your retention. And Insight and N-Central can help out here in certain ways, such as, if you have full auditing enabled on your endpoints, you could use N-Central to kind of parse the logs on the endpoints where they sit. Or you can also use N-Central or Insight to, enable syslog and push syslog out to all your endpoints and designate where it's going to dump the logs to. But we don't have, Enable doesn't have its own log aggregation solution itself. We can facilitate getting logs into that type of a solution, but we don't have a solution ourselves. For the medium risk, we start getting into those common, again, the common controls that are asked for in medium risk profiles. One of the primary ones that almost all of them say is ensure time sync is correct across all assets, because if you're looking at a log and it has a timestamp on it at 8 p.m. and you're looking at the log from somewhere else and that same event or correlation event has a timestamp of 6 a.m. because the clocks don't match, that's going to make it almost impossible to figure, to actually figure out those correlations. So time syncing is very important. Enable detailed logging that can assist with forensic audit. So that's your verbose logging or your audit logging that you can enable on appliances inside of Windows, the audit logging. And again, those will be things that if you want to standardize and monitor to make sure that that logging is occurring, N-Central Insight is a great way of making sure that that's enabled on the endpoint, that they are producing those logs and that you're getting those logs to the destination you want them to go to. Maintaining network DNS query audit logs. So if you have a DNS server in the environment, that's fairly straightforward to do. If you don't have a DNS server and you're just allowing a cheap router to handle that function, that's going to be a little bit harder to do there. Maintaining device level URL audits, so you know which websites were visited by endpoints. Recording remote shell, bash, PowerShell, and other command line audit logs. That is something that you can enable. Again, that's a native functionality in Microsoft for some of that. Other is going to take a security solution or monitoring solution or syslog or SIM or something else to kind of collect that information. Our EDR solution has a really good way of not only recording all of those command line inputs, bash, PowerShell, whatever, on Mac, Linux, and PC, just outright flat recording those commands, but also evaluating them in real time to decide if they are malicious or not. Maintain centralized collection of logs for 90 days and review logs weekly or more frequently. And this is one of those that if you are an individual IT person at a business, you could probably do this. But as an MSP, there is no reasonable way for you to manually review these logs. You need them to be ingested into a SIM solution of some sort to process through them. Otherwise, you'd have to just pay somebody to, probably more than one person to just sit there all day, every day, and do nothing but parse through logs. And that's not scalable. We'll keep on trucking with email and web browser controls. So these are going to be, pretty much everybody's going to know what the benefits here of having proper security controls around email and web browsers are going to give you. They are the primary vehicle through which many user-initiated threats occur. They are popular with threat actors for that reason. It gives them a way to deliver threats and attacks right directly to somebody's doorstep. And also having good controls that helps keep our end users from getting into trouble. And the low risk, everybody is pretty much asking for something in some way, shape, or form. And whenever we pop up to the medium risk, we get even more asks for security controls being applied. So we're going to continue to see that pattern as we go further through the controls list, that it's going to be where originally we had everybody was asking for everything at low risk. We're going to start getting into some things that aren't asked for in low risk and are only really asked for once you get into medium and high. And here are our common low risk controls. So content or DNS filtering to protect end users from malicious web traffic and endpoints from malicious traffic. And also asking for, just use currently supported and up-to-date browsers and email clients. Once we move up to medium risk, we start asking for the things that are more traditionally part of the services that MSPs offer. We're going to have the ability, the ask is you need to have URL filters and block lists in place for email and web browsers. And usually you're tackling that with an appliance on the edge, or you're handling that with a endpoint agent like DNS filter. They ask for you to remove or disable unauthorized browsers or email client plugins and extensions. This one's a little bit of a challenge because you're going to have personal preferences out there where some end users want to use Firefox and others want to use Chrome. The downside is that, of course, adds to the complexity of your management job there, keeping track of those. You got to have two different, now you need to monitor to make sure that two different applications are up to date, and you need to monitor to make sure that those two applications don't have unauthorized extensions being used. And depending on what your preferred web browser is, you can use Insight or Incentral to monitor and review what those extensions are. You're also going to benefit from whatever your EDR or your endpoint solution in place can also help with these. But if you do want to start exerting more control over web browser extensions and add-ons, we do have some examples in the automation cookbook that show you how you can, for Chrome, control the load order and apply or install new extensions for browser for Chrome. And you can just as easily say that, you know what, I don't want any extensions installed for Chrome, and go make that force that application to your Chrome browsers via your Incentral or Insight agent, because most of the time, these are just registry configuration changes you're going to be doing. Medium risk also mandates that your DMARC, SPF, and DKIM are set up for your email domains. If you have been managing email for your clients for any amount of time, you're probably already familiar with DMARC, SPF, and DKIM. Unless your clients have been using, mail daemons or been using your clients have been using mail daemons, or they've been using things like cPanel mail, then you may not have ever had to deal with these. But chances are you have. They are mandated at this point in the kind of the medium risk profile. And another personal point of opinion, if you are handling email for your clients, it shouldn't matter what their risk profile is. You should make sure that DMARC, SPF, and DKIM is set up for their email domain, regardless of their risk profile. The same kind of goes for blocking attachments based on file types not needed for legitimate business purposes. So again, this is something that they're not asking for until you get to the medium risk profile for most of these controls, but just as a personal point of opinion, as well as it matches well with what our security packaging offering that Stephanie puts together and coaches on about how you can create this isn't the words that she uses in her boot camp, but a good, better, best, or a minimum viable security package of everything you should be doing, and then it only gets more complex from there. These would be some things that, even though our frameworks say that this is something that you should only be concerned with once you get to a medium risk profile environment, as an MSP, it's one of those, it's inconsequential to you. You can streamline the process. It's not that hard to do. And you know what? You can charge for it. You can make margins on it. So why not do it anyway? And we have ability here with Insight and Incentral to help with those browser extensions again. DNS filter for URL and filter block for content blocking and filtering of web browsers. And then also Mail Assure for the DMARC, SPF, and being able to block attachments. Malware defense and continuous monitoring. So this is one of the primary reasons that MSPs are engaged today. It used to be that if you were an MSP and you were engaged by a client or a prospect, it was to provide uptime or new capability or make sure that their printers print, whatever it was. But now the expectation has shifted to be that this is one of the primary functions you are serving, providing malware defenses and cybersecurity defenses to prevent them from being, to prevent malware and ransomware attacks. And it is one of, if not probably the primary business challenge most of your clients are going to be facing, is the risks that we face if we ever suffer a ransomware attack. What does that look like for us? That is one of those events that can threaten a business. So of course your clients are going to be rightfully worried about it. This is a case where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Being able to put these types of proper controls in place are going to be minuscule costs when compared to what the potential impacts and damages and costs could be if something does happen and you don't have proper defenses in place to prevent the damage from occurring in the first place. This isn't even getting into the conversation about resiliency and recoverability. This is about can you prevent it from happening in the first place? And having good malware defenses in place, that's going to give you as the MSP a lot of knock-on benefits. It's going to improve your support ticket queues and other KPIs. For your clients, it can help satisfy more stringent security controls that are now being asked for by their insurers. Also, having good, proper security controls in place around malware and ransomware, this solves sleepless nights. I can guarantee there are some of you on here that have clients that you worry about because you just know they don't have things properly set up or configured, and they don't have good proper protections in place. And whenever something happens, it's going to be bad. Having these good controls in place, that's less heartburn for your team, fewer cold sweats. All around the team will be happier when you have good proper controls in place. And that, of course, also your clients benefit from that as well. And this is all about when it comes to the malware defenses. You're playing the statistics game. You've probably heard that defenders have to be successful every time. An attacker only has to be successful once. You're trying to stack the deck in your favor so that you get more successful defends against against an attacker. So here are our low risk controls. Everybody is asking for something in some way, shape, or form. But whenever we move up to the medium risk profile, still everybody's got something to say here, because again, this is one of those primary concerns and primary agents of chaos that we have to contend with is malware. So the more high risk an environment is, the higher the profile of that environment, the more they're going to ask you to do to protect that environment from malware and ransomware. So common low risk controls that are asked for, they're asking that, yeah, you got an anti-malware solution on every endpoint. That's a given. Auto update anti-malware solutions as they become available, and restricting removable media from autoplay. Those are all things that they're all going to be asking for in some way, shape, or form. But whenever we step up to the medium risk profiles, it does get a little bit more prescriptive. And again, not all of these things are going to be point solutions that you go out and buy and install. They're going to be configuration changes in the environment. One is, first is implementing scanning of removable media for malicious files on access. So they're not saying, whenever you plug in an external USB key, the whole drive needs to be scanned. What they're asking is after you mount that media and the system starts to access it, whenever it decides it's going to start accessing it, it's scanning it then and there and evaluating before it reads it and executes it. Implementing anti-exploitation solutions like the Windows Data Execution Prevention. If this is your first time learning about hearing Windows Data Execution Prevention, this is a methodology, process, architecture inside of Windows to prevent executables or execution of happening in locations that it shouldn't be. So there's no reason why something operating in the user space should be executing from a Windows system location, those types of things. And that'll be something that if you want to monitor that and enable it, you should be able to do that through Insight or Essential with service monitors or 24/7 checks. Maintaining centralized management of anti-malware or antivirus solutions that are asking you to have that centralized control, which for MSPs, this is kind of a given because we are naturally drawn to multi-tenant cloud-based solutions for things like AV. So we kind of get a gimme here for MSPs. And also they ask for modern behavioral and heuristics-based anti-malware, antivirus solutions. So they're saying, no, you cannot use just standard old AV with signature-based detection. CLAM AV is not good enough. You need to move into more advanced solutions. And here is where you as an MSP, while these controls may say that, well, we want you to have an antivirus or anti-malware solution in place. For you as an MSP, you're selling a service and you need to be able to commoditize, scale, and sell it so that you can make good, proper margins on it. That's going to, your business interests here are going to push you away from satisfying these controls with a AV and instead satisfy these controls with an EDR solution, because an EDR solution gives you everything that they're asking for in one convenient solution package, but it's also giving you the capabilities of some of the other controls like log aggregation and log recording. If you're using EDR with the complete license, then you're satisfying that for your centralized log collection and aggregation for your endpoints. So that's one of those, one stone, five birds kind of situation. Then data recovery, business continuity, and disaster recovery. So we were talking about data protection earlier. This is a completely different set of security controls that are about recoverability of data and business continuity. So why is it important? I hope everybody here knows why data recovery is important for MSPs. One, it's a good margin generator. It keeps you out of situations, out of bad situations. Also, of course, keeps your clients out of bad situations. And you need to plan for yourself and for your clients. Part of what you are offering is resiliency. You are making their business and their IT infrastructure and environments more resilient against interruptions in service, against compromises, against anything that's going to stop that business from being profitable, efficient and profitable. So having backups of data available for when everything goes wrong is an absolute lifesaver and part of planning out that resiliency. Backups are also the target of threat actors now, so both for exfiltration purposes and also so they can try and maximize the impact of an attack by deleting your copies of backups. So having proper controls around how backups are done and where they're stored are going to be very important. And it's not just the fact that you have backups, it's going to be the RTOs and RPOs are going to be very important whenever we're talking about the security controls. And for MSPs in particular, this is one of those side items of if you have never sat down and talked with your clients about how, you've probably told them, yes, RTO and RPOs for a server is 3 hours, 4 hours. We'll be able to get it rebuilt and back up and you'll be up in operation. But have you ever sat down and actually talked with them about what it would look like if the entire environment was gone and you had to restore all of the data to new equipment? How long are they down? If you're not having that discussion, that's a discussion you need to start getting comfortable with so that you can properly plan for it and have the clients involved in that decision-making process of saying, you know what, I can't afford to be down for 5 days while you do this. How can we make sure that we can be back up and running in 1 day? Now, that might mean you're changing the conversation into it's not about backup anymore. It's about disaster recovery and business continuity, and we need to have failovers and hot sites for you, but good way of getting into that conversation. So for low risk, almost everybody is asking for something around data recovery. CGIS, I have it in here as NA, but that's because, well, they've kind of said in their low risk, there's this common operating notation there of you should be the same across the board. Everything doesn't matter. The risk profile of the environment. If you're applying CGIS, then you're doing this across the board for everything. So that's the reason why this one, even though you're going to be doing this for an environment that has to follow CGIS, just because the way I broke this up, it's going to be an NA here. But just know that that means it's accounted for in the low risk. And then for medium risk, this is where we start to see some separation between some of the frameworks. Some of them are going to say that, after you've got those, whatever controls you're going to implement as your baselines for your low risk, there's nothing more here whenever you move up to medium risk. but there are some notable ones in here. The ISO 27001's got additional controls. The PCI DSS has additional controls. Essential 8 has additional. The CIS and NIST cybersecurity frameworks all have additionals. And here are those controls for low risk environments. You have to create and document. So again, processes of data and system recovery, define the scope of data to be protected, automating the backups, protecting data at rest in backups with at least the same controls and the same encryptions or better of the data at rest in production. And also maintaining isolated backups from the production network. And Insight and Essential can help out with a lot of these things through service monitors and 24/7 checks. But our biggest player here, of course, is going to be our Cove data protection, which gives you the ability to do an agent-based backup of physical servers and workstations, VMs, whether they're Hyper-V or ESX, and being able to do restores into your desired target destination of bare metal, virtualized recovery of physical to virtual into Hyper-V or into ESX VMware, recovery testing, and a bunch of other stuff. And whenever we move into the medium risk, there are some additional benefits we're going to be able to provide you through Code data protection to help hit some of these medium risk controls. One is testing backups quarterly or more frequently for recoverability and integrity. Again, the frameworks are asking for quarterly. You as an MSP, you're not going to, hopefully you're not going to sit down and do this as a manual process of doing a recovery of a system, booting it, verifying it, and going through that whole process. That is many hours per month for a technician to devote to that. Also testing and refining recovery process procedures yearly. So it's not just that you're doing those quarterly, was it a good backup? Can I restore that data? But going through the full restoration process, a parallel process of, all right, can we take and restore this data back into production and not skip a beat? Or even doing a full test where you're saying, all right, we're going to pretend that the domain controller is down on Friday afternoon. We're going to try and stand up a recovered version of that controller on Saturday and verify and see if it can be put back in place and run just fine. Those types of processes. And again, Cove data protection, that's our solution here to help you out there. And we do have the testing available, the automated testing available inside of Cove. So that first control there, you don't have to devote your technician's time to that. You can let the product do the restore, test the boot, verify it, take a screenshot, send it to you as a confirmation. All right, now for what's our network infrastructure. So network infrastructure, why is this important? So almost everything that a business does nowadays, all of the business's operations are going to flow over a network connection at some point in the majority of situations. And securing networks, this is one of the more effective, one of the more effective measures of keeping bad actors out is making sure you have properly set up and configured networks and the ability to access those networks. VPNs, firewalls, edge appliances, web application firewalls, they're all exposed to the internet, to the public. They are your first line of defense in a lot of situations. And keeping anything you can do to keep threat actors as far away from internal assets is a great way to reduce the effectiveness of a threat actor's attacks, if not giving you the capability of outright stopping some of them. For low risk environments, there's are a few of these in here that don't speak to network infrastructure directly. They're side thoughts. They're not addressing it in their set of controls because of the industry, the vertical, or the region that they address. So we're seeing here that we've got a few, notable discrepancies here where nobody's asking things about network infrastructure directly. And whenever we move up, though, you'll see that it all of a sudden explodes. Once you get to a medium risk profile, they start asking for a lot more controls to be in place for some of these. And some of them, again, they kind of just stop at the low risk. They're just like, you know what? It doesn't matter the risk profile of the environment, where it's low, medium, or high. You should do this for everyone. These are more stringent controls for a lot of these that we're going to be covering that start to be actual, I don't want to say challenges for MSPs, but new territory for MSPs for some of these controls. So the common low risk ones are, keep all network infrastructure patched and on most recent stable firmware. So this is back to a processes thing. You need to know processes and asset inventories. You need to know what equipment your clients have. You need to be subscribed to the vendors for security alerts, bulletins, and notifications. You need to know when those new firmwares are released that address certain vulnerabilities. So Insight and Essential can help with the deployment of those firmwares. If you've got a standardized stack, spend the effort, create the automation, be able to push out those updates when you need them in a matter of minutes, rather than somebody having to go log into an appliance, upload the firmware to the appliance, sit there and babysit it. Just automate it through your existing Insight or Essential platform. But whenever we pop into the medium risk, it starts asking for more. It's asking for actual network architecture design to have been done with security in mind. So implementing and maintaining a secure network design that you're supporting by physical and logical maps, along with any other documentation you need. Ensuring secure protocols, only secure protocols are used in the environment. So that's going to be things like not using deprecated ones. So no TLS 1.0 or 1.1. I know SMB version 1 enabled, forcing secure connections where you have the capability. Having a centralized control over authentication and authorization of network access by devices and users. That is a giant, broad control that covers a lot of stuff. That can be talking about conditional access controls that you can implement through Intune. You can do it through, this is an old example, but radius servers. So there's multiple ways to skin a cat here, and there are going to be ways of appropriately implementing this type of a control in different size of environments. That could be as simple as MAC list filtering. You set up your client's environments, you set up their network, it is segmented, they have their production environment and they have their guest network. And on the production environment, you don't get issued, maybe you're just using MAC filtering. So you just only allow devices to be issued to receive a DHCP issued address if they on the MAC list, or maybe you have an outright security control in your router that allows you to just block it, and it's blocked until you go in and manually approve it. Many different ways of doing this at different scales. So that one's going to be a research what's economical and scalable for your client's environment, but also what supports you standardizing, so you can get on a standardized stack and set of services yourself. Implementing and maintaining the use of secure management principles and protocols. So that's going to be like making sure that WA2 Enterprise or WPA3 is used for wireless connections. Making sure that you have rogue device detection enabled for your, if you've got something like You have ubiquity equipment, and you've got Unify access points, and you're using the Unify access point rogue device detection for rogue access points, those types of things. Implementing and maintaining documentation on physical port assignment. This is one of those that, especially in the CMMC or anybody that's trying to adhere to NIST standards, this is a really big and common one there, is you need to be able to say what devices are connected to which ports and having the capability of shutting down individual ports if you want to. You can supplement or put in some compensating controls. So maybe you have a client that can't afford a managed switch, so that you can do port-based isolation. Now, a good compensating control there is, instead of making them spend the money on a managed switch or some other network security appliance that's going to allow you to do that, leverage the network isolation feature that's inside of a lot of popular EDRs. Our EDR solution, SentinelOne, it has that capability in it to say, all right, there is for whatever reason, we've decided we want to isolate an endpoint on the network. We can isolate that through a software-defined measure via EDR, either as an automated action or an action somebody takes in response to investigation of a detected threat event. And also implementing VPN or other secure access methods for remote devices and users. So that could be something, that could be making sure that you have VPNs set up here. You have VPN appliance, and all your endpoints have VPN clients so you can connect back. Or making sure that you have your VPN appliance properly configured so that you have your traffic properly split, so your internal traffic stays internal to the site without having to traverse out over the VPN and then back again, those types of things. And some of this may get into, it does. Some of this gets into the world of network engineering. And if you don't have it's easy to understand networks. Almost everybody here, I can guarantee, can probably sit down and start from scratch and build a decent network. But to do it securely and with thought and process and with forethought, it kind of does take an educated network engineer to do it right. If at least not right, at least competently and good enough. Network monitoring and defense. So this is going to be different than the infrastructure side. The infrastructure side is the initial design and implementation and configuration of it. The monitoring is, still we're going to get a lot of the same benefits that we're going to be getting out of proper network infrastructure in the first place. Network monitoring just steps it up a step. And we'll see here that even though our low risk profiles had some controls for network infrastructure, none of them have anything about network monitoring in the low risk area. It's not until we get to a medium risk profile that we start asking for network monitoring and management. And you'll see that some of these have a not insignificant number of security controls that they're asking for. And what are those common controls? Again, these are the medium ones because there were no low risk ones that said that you needed to do monitoring. So this is going to be implementing a SIEM or other centralized security event monitoring and alerting solution in the environment. Host-based intrusion detection on high-risk or mission-critical systems. That can be a standalone host-based intrusion solution, or that could be something like an EDR solution that has it baked in. Implementing a network-based IDS or IPS, so intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system. If you have never played around with an IDS or IPS solution, and you want to start playing around one and better understand what they're capable of, go check out Security Onion. It is free, open source. It has a lot of good community support. And it's actually, honestly, it's what I learned IDS and IPS on, as well as how to write Suricata and Bro rules, which, you know about Suricata and Bro, that's starting to, those are also leveraged in other solutions like Snort and other SIMs. Restrict and filter traffic between segmented networks. So not just securely designing your network so that you have, your production environment separate from your finance department, separate from your guest network, but that the filtering and controls between those segments means that access between them is properly restricted. Conditional access controls. So that is if an endpoint does not have proper configuration and authorization, then it cannot connect to a specific resource. This is really, I believe, the smoothest delivery of this, honestly, right now, is the conditional access controls that Microsoft provides you through Azure AD and Intune. Those are great examples and great ways of doing it. Maintain network flow logs and review and response to SIM alerting. So the purpose of the SIM is not to give you all of the information. It is to filter through, find the things of interest, raise that item of interest to you so that you can then go look at all of that massive collection of logs that you have to put together the rest of the story. And just personal experience and my interactions with MSPs. This SIM integration in medium risk environments is a bigger, I don't want to say a bigger ask than what MSPs are prepared for, but it might be a bigger ask as far as your clients go on investment of a new service or solution. So this is one of those that can actually, this is one of those things that you need to do, that you should do, but whenever you do it, you're probably going to get a non-significant amount of pushback from the clients that don't understand the value of a SIM or haven't or do not operate in a regulated space that they need one in the first place. Cyber hygiene and security awareness training. So this is going to be an obvious on why is this important. End users are they can be your best line of defense, your last line of defense, or your worst line of defense. So you want them to be as well prepared as you can get them to be to assist you in mitigating risk to their business. And this is just a consequence that not all risks are solvable with a technology solution. Some of these, some risks have to be addressed through processes and standard operating procedures and proper training. Also, this is an easy profit generator for MSPs. Get enrolled in a program, package it, commoditize it, scale it, deliver it efficiently. There's good margins in it. It also helps demonstrate to clients that you are actually interested in their well-being and defense. It helps get rid of those, well, what do we pay you for? It can help keep those conversations at bay a little bit. And also, having security awareness training really helps with things like business email compromise, or whenever you're having those quarterly business reviews with your clients, being honest with them of, these are the things that your employees can do that I cannot protect you against. So we have to train your employees not to do these things. For low risk, everybody is asking for training of some way, shape, or form for all businesses. It's a given now that employees are going to undergo proper cybersecurity awareness and hygiene training. Whenever we move up to medium risk, only certain controls are asking for more than that, more than the basics. And here is our common controls for low risk profile client environments. these are going to be a lot of, well, yeah, obvious things. Creating a security awareness program that's conducted at time of hire and annually or more frequently. Uh, all users are trained and informed on how to recognize and report social engineering attacks, making sure that you as the MSP have that method for them to report them is in place. All users are trained on best practices around credential management, MFA. Your role here as an MSP is, yes, you provide that training, but also it doesn't matter how much training you provide to an end user about what how they should properly handle credentials and passwords. If you don't make it easy for them to follow best practices, they're not going to follow best practices. So this is where a solution like Passportal with the password manager comes into play. So your end users can get uniquely generated passwords for every account, and you can monitor to make sure that those passwords are significantly complex. All users, they're trained how to store, process, and destroy data. That includes physical copies of stuff as well, whiteboards, printed materials. This is, again, this is one of those business culture things that you might have a hard time overcoming with a client of like, you really can't, you shouldn't be writing this, intellectual property or these mission critical financial numbers down somewhere where somebody can just walk into the office and see them that has no business seeing. All users are trained on dangers of using non-network controlled networks. Don't go to Starbucks and do really sensitive work there. All users are trained how to report non-compliant software or hardware based on end of support dates, incorrect versions. This is another one of those business cultures that you may come up against a brick wall with your client, where they're like, "Hey, we pay you to take care of this. We shouldn't have to worry about this." The proper response, though, is, yes, we should be working together to make sure that we're mitigating this risk, which means they got skin in the game. They need to put forward a little bit of effort, and part of that effort is making sure that employees know how and where and when to put in a help desk ticket that their Chrome says it's out of date, or that their line of business software that they're using says it's out of date or isn't the same version as another employee's. And that they're, not only that client end users are trained, but also that you have set up a method for them to report potential incidents. Again, this is all of the low risk. So it means that all businesses should be doing this. Then when we get up to medium risk, it starts refining it a little bit more. And that refinement boils down to, implementing your security awareness training. So it's not just general training across the board. It is tailored specifically for the roles and the industry that the business operates in. So you would wind up with different security awareness training for your general users versus privileged and power users versus your C-suite and your board and presidents. They've got an entirely different set of security awareness training that they need to go through because they are high value targets. And also the IT team, whether that is you or the internal IT team of the client, if you're helping co-manage, they're going to need training as well. And it's going to need to be significantly different than the training that a regular end user receives. All right, we got how many more slides have we got? We got a few more. We'll see if we can't bust them out in the next 10 minutes, since we are hitting the end of the hour. Service provider management, really important control in the sense that you need to know who your suppliers are. You need to know when they're releasing alerts and advisories. You need to be able to apply their remediations and mitigations that they advise you to apply. And you're only going to be able to do that if you have processes and controls around it. all of the framework, most of the frameworks ask for something in some way, shape, or form at the low risk level. Once we pop up to the medium risk, they start asking for a lot more. And on the low risk, the common thing that they're asking for across the board is you need a list of your third-party service providers, and you need how they're related to the business and their contact information. That's kind of what they're asking. Whenever you move up to the medium risk, they're asking for quite a bit more there on that part of the managing that relationship with third-party service providers. Creating and maintaining a third-party service provider management policy and procedure, so everything's written down and documented. So whenever the auditors show up, you can point it out to them. Conduct third-party service. Make sure that your third-party service providers, you've reached out to their governance, risk, and compliance teams or to their security teams, and you've gotten their security statements and practices that they're willing to release to you. Classifying your third-party service providers based on the data they process, what your business dependency is, the applicable regulations. You need to be able to your printer, whoever provides your toner for your printers. I mean, that is a third-party service provider, but they're providing a kind of a physical service there, and you're not going to need the same type of information and agreements and contracts between you and them as you would a third-party vendor that's processing PHI. And roles and responsibilities should be clearly defined between your third-party service providers and the customer, either whether that's your client or you. And that's, for the context there, is if you have an infrastructure as a service versus a platform as a service or disaster recovery as a service. If you're consuming one of those, if you're consuming infrastructure as a service, well, they are responsible for the infrastructure and its security. But if you're hosting something there and you've got a server spun up, you're responsible for that server, for its security. That's all on you. Whereas if you're using a platform as a service, they're managing the server for you. You're just consuming a microservice out of it. So the responsibilities are going to be significantly different there. Application security, I'm going to blast through this one really quickly because I don't think there's going to be a lot of people here today that are doing active application building and design. Might be a few of you here. If you are, hopefully you're already going to know all of this stuff. But whenever you're developing applications, they have to be just as secure as the environment that their development needs to be just as secure as the environments they're going to be used in and what's required. It's also important to have these application security, these controls around it, because they're going to have vulnerabilities. As soon as you build an application, it is going to have vulnerabilities in it. You need a process by which you are going to manage that. And it doesn't matter if it's just an application, an API, software solution of any type, whatever it is, there's going to be vulnerabilities. But we're not going to be seeing that in low risk environments. So that's why here we've got nothing for low risk. But as soon as we pop over into an environment that is classified as medium risk, there are additional controls being asked for. Quite a few is being added in here. So that's going to be common controls for, that shouldn't be low risk, that should be medium risk. But what are the common controls for medium risk? Oh, they're going to ask you to create and maintain secure development processes with vulnerability testing and security training for developers. Maintaining processes for receiving and addressing reported vulnerabilities in software, so that you maybe not a bug bounty program, but you need a bug reporting program, a vulnerability reporting mechanism in place. Classify and prioritizing reported vulnerabilities, that you have root cause analysis on reported vulnerabilities, that you maintain a software bill of materials for applications and libraries and other components that are used in developing apps. Using supported and up-to-date components and libraries from trusted sources, so not just some random GitHub repository you found. It needs to be something good, something with a good reputation. Separating your dev from your production environments, and using vetted modules for security functions. Good example of this is encryption modules. If you're going to have to transmit data across the wire, you're going to have to do that in an encrypted format. Don't try to roll your own solution there. Just go and use OpenSSL or a FIPS certified encryption module or something else to handle it. Don't try to do that yourself, because that is a entirely new set of constraints and controls and concerns you're adding in by doing that. Incident response management. You never want to figure out in the middle of an emergency what you should be doing. That is not a good way to operate. You can't, really can't run a business in panic mode, or at least run a successful business in panic mode. So you want to have good incident response documentation and security controls in place, because, well, again, you don't want to figure out what to do in the middle of a situation. You do not want a technician asking the question of, do I turn off these computers that are involved in suspected ransomware event, or do I just isolate them on the network? They shouldn't be asking that question. That should already be answered for them. Also, knowing who's responsible for what in an incident response, that reduces redundant efforts during incident response. You don't want to waste you and your technicians' time doing things if your client's insurance hasn't been engaged and they're bringing in their own incident response team. You're probably not going to get paid by the insurer for the work that you did. So if the insurer is bringing in their own team and they're going to pay that team to do it, know what they are going to do, what those responsibilities are going to be. And also, this gives legal counsel time to weigh in with contract language, statements of works, and prior to an incident. You do not want to have to call your legal counsel at 1 o'clock on a Saturday morning because your largest client just got hit with ransomware. All of those questions need to be answered before that. For low risk environments, there are plenty of controls that are being asked for. And as we move up to medium risk, there's even more being asked for. So there is going to be a level of additional complexity and controls being asked for when we move to medium. Low risk, again, create and maintain. You got to have that documentation and processes in place. List of who's responsible for what. Somebody needs to be designated as your incident manager, and they need a backup. You need contact information for everybody that's going to be involved in an incident. You need to have a process for users to report those security incidents. And whenever we move into medium risk profiles, it adds on even more. It wants you to develop and maintain an incident response process that is consisting of an incident response plan, which is kind of just your general responses, of who's responsible generally for things. But then you have incident response playbooks, which are specific to a type of incident or affected asset. So you should have a dedicated playbook for your client on what happens if you get hit with ransomware on a workstation versus what happens if you get hit with ransomware on a server. Business continuity and disaster recovery is being asked for here as well. That is documented, those processes that exist and are maintained. That a communication plan is established and reviewed yearly. So who's being called, legal, PR, regulatory agencies. Assigning roles and responsibilities for everyone that would be involved in any part of that incident response based on your playbooks and your response plan. That's going to include your clients as well. They're going to have some responsibilities that they need to be aware of, and it needs to be clearly defined for them so that they aren't thrown off whenever something happens and you're starting to ask them to do certain things. Create and maintain primary and alternate channels of communication. You need probably even a tertiary channel of communication, because if something happens and email is out and VoIP services are out, you still need a way to contact people. Perform tabletop exercises and other incident response exercises annually, and post-mortem of incidents. This is a really important one. When something happens, even if it is something as simple as our EDR solution caught a threat, you need to do a post-mortem of that incident to say, well, how were we exposed to it in the first place, and are there any opportunities to prevent this from happening in the future? So can we block this attack, further up the kill, towards the start of the kill chain, instead of catching it in the middle? Can we catch it in the beginning, at the firewall, at the web application firewall, somewhere else, rather than just on the endpoint? Penetration testing. This is another one of those that, as we've gone through this, nobody is asking for this really in the low risk, but they are going to be asking to do them in high risk profiles. And well, why is penetration testing important? You can't fix what you do not know about. If you do not know your environments have an issue, you don't know to go fix that issue. That is what a penetration testing engagement is there for. It brings an entirely new set of capabilities and skills to bear on this problem that you might be lacking. Also, for your client's point of view, this is your way of saying, yes, somebody is watching me, somebody is checking me over my shoulder to make sure things are being done correctly, without having to go into a full-on audit of something like a SOC 2 audit, or going in for ISO compliance. Also, it makes you and your clients more resilient by finding those things you missed, because it's the things you miss that get you in trouble. It is required for certain audited standards. They require you to be have penetration testing with reports, post-mortems, and remediation actions documented and planned. Also, pen tests, they represent a revenue opportunity for you. And you can charge for remediation of whatever the discovered vulnerabilities are. A question I get asked on penetration sometimes is, how do I prepare for a pen test? And the answer is, you don't prepare for a pen test. That's the purpose of the pen test, to tell you the things you should fix. That's why you're paying them. Come in here, test my systems, and tell me what I should fix. So don't get too bent out of shape trying to prepare for a penetration test. Here again, low risk. Nothing's being asked for out of any of our frameworks or controls. Medium risk, some of them start asking for it. The PCI DSS asks for it. NIST asks for it. The Essential 8 and the Cyber Essentials, they never ask for penetration testing by name in any of their controls. So this is, I went through the trouble of mapping all of these out and showing this evolution over time to kind of pull back the layers and say, you know what, even though you are in the EU, or you are in the UK or Australia, and you have these controls there, Cyber Essentials or Essential 8, you can satisfy what those are asking for by following one of these other frameworks as well, like the CIS or the NIST cybersecurity framework. If you're doing what those frameworks call for, you're going to satisfy what Essential 8 or Cyber Essentials are asking for. And here we'll see, once we get up to medium risk, we're starting to see those asks come in. And medium, so again, low risk, according to most of these frameworks, low risk environments don't need pen testing. It's not until you get to the medium risk ones. And what they start asking for is, they want you to have a internal penetration testing program that's going to look at the network, line of business applications, API, endpoints, secure configuration versus software vulnerabilities, and also physical security. And that's another whole realm of security that a lot of MSPs don't get involved with, but it is a good opportunity. But you may actually be restricted in some areas because it's considered it is a regulated, physical security is a regulated profession that you need special bonding and licenses to do in certain states. So be mindful of that. Also implement an external pen testing program. So that's going to be doing penetration testing against websites, web applications, environmental and social engineering, external attack simulations, and that you have a documented process for implementing mitigations based on the deficiencies that are discovered during penetration testing. And again, penetration testing is here on the end. It's that last thing you should be doing, because if you didn't do any of the things that were being asked of you to do before you got the pen testing, by the time you do the pen testing, the recommendation for the pen testing is going to be go back and do all of these things you haven't done, that you have a, that there's already a list of these things. So I always kind of go with, if security is a concern with you and you want to improve it fast, pen testing is the last thing you do. The first thing you do is you go grab an established security framework and just work through it as a list. And am I doing this? Yes, no. Am I doing this? Yes, no. And the things you're not doing, figure out how to deliver on. So we've hit the end. I appreciate everybody sticking with me for a few minutes over to make up for the technical difficulties we were having earlier in the day. Yes, one of the questions came through is, is this aligned to the implementation groups out of the CIS critical security controls? And it loosely is, and it's not wholly intentional that it aligns, but it's just a consequence of the way the CIS controls are broken up and organized. They are built on that principle of best impact for the least amount of effort in play. And here's a great question. So are you finding that many MSPs are focused on most or all of these? Where are we as an industry? Personal opinion time and personal observations. The successful MSPs that are not having any issues right now with growth, they are the MSPs that are doing these things. They are they're not making that they're not making the move into the MSSP model. They're still an MSP. They're just implementing all of these basics. They're implementing all of, developing the processes and the documentation for their client's business, focused on the needs of the client's business, rather than we have a package, we sell the package, and that's all you get, and we don't tailor it in any way for your environments. Usually I'm finding that it's probably the medium risk and down. So the controls that are being asked for in low risk and medium risk. Personal opinion, as an MSP, you should be doing all of this stuff. No questions asked for yourself and all of your clients. Of course, that is not applicable to all scenarios, all business models. Some MSPs do not want to get into providing services to those types of clients. They don't have the operational overhead, skill, patience to tackle it. So there is still a segment of the MSP market, and it's the same segment you would think of as the I don't want to say truck slammers, but the break fix, the ones that are still in the reactive mode of coming in and fixing the problems whenever a client raises a problem, rather than the MSPs that have gotten to the point where they can kind of put their foot down and say, These are the services we provide. We provide them for a reason. That reason is security and keeping your business and reducing your business's risk exposure as much as we can. And that's why we do these things and why we will not be involved in a relationship if we can't do those things. The MSPs that are doing that and aligning to these frameworks or a given framework, those are the ones that they are having success now, and they're probably going to continue to have success in the future because it's the demand that is now being placed on the MSPs. There are national initiatives, federal initiatives, state initiatives, local initiatives all over the world from legislative bodies saying, hey, cybersecurity is important. We're going to start mandating some stuff here. Australia is going to be updating the Essential 8. The UK is going to be updating cybersecurity essentials because they are obviously lacking in comparison to other recognized frameworks. They were a bare minimum recommendation for individual businesses. And you as an MSP, you're kind of doing a disservice to yourself to follow only what's being asked for in some of these frameworks, because there are other earning opportunities. Just because your client, absolutely positively qualifies as a low risk client, that doesn't mean you shouldn't still try to sell them DNS filtering. It doesn't mean you shouldn't still be trying to offer them EDR rather than just AV. There's the business part of the conversation there that you need to absorb and understand that. And also for your clients as well, helping them understand that, yep, the controls and the framework says we should do this, but we know and understand as the cybersecurity professional in the room that this is bare minimum, and we're doing a disservice by only doing this. We also want to bring these other security controls in as well, because, well, one, it does make the client's environment more secure and more resilient, but also it reduces your risk exposure as well, and it increases your revenue generation capabilities. And you'll see that if you go attend some of Stephanie Hammond's boot camps, her designing security packages boot camp in particular, you'll see that there's a little bit of disjoint between my low, medium, high risk and what she has designed as packages, because we're kind of making the assumption that you as an MSP and your clients that are participating, that are your clients, you should be following things as if you were medium risk, just as a given, because again, the revenue opportunities, but also it's risk mitigation. And if you can reduce the risk exposure of your business and your clients' businesses and make a healthy margin on it, why not? All right, everybody, looks like we've answered all the questions that came through for this session. Don't look like I missed anything. I'm going to throw my email in the chat. So if anybody has any follow-up questions, or you want to have a deeper conversation on a specific control or a specific framework, feel free to reach out to me and we'll start the conversation going back. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us for another Enable Bootcamp. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Also, if you stuck it out this long with us, just a reminder, you're earning points for the All Stars program, which is our recognition program for the boot camps and office hours. Every time you attend the office hours boot camps, do training with us, you're earning points, and eventually those points will get you recognition or swag at events such as Empower. So you can, kind of stand up and be proud and distinguish yourself a little bit from the rest of your peers. All right, everybody, again, thank you for taking the time to join today's session. Hope you have a good rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you on future boot camps.